One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
Okay, Katie, that's quite the thing. Tell us about the international reaction to that comment.
It's exactly what you would expect, David. There is concern, deep levels of concern, particularly among European allies. But also this is certainly getting attention in Canada. The vast majority, about 2/3 of NATO country members, don't actually meet their defense spending targets. Now, the way that Donald Trump characterizes how defense spending works when it comes to NATO and NATO membership, he mischaracterizes it. He sort of sums it up as like dues. It doesn't work like that. All of these countries agree they pledge to spend 2% of their GDP on defense spending. Canada falls short of that and is not going to get close to that. Even though there have been increases in spending, but a number of our colleagues in Ottawa today pressed Bill Blair about whether Canada should be concerned about what Trump is saying, given Canada's reliance on the United States for defense, not just through NATO, but just defense in terms of the relationship between countries, that cross-border relationship. Bill Blair, the Minister of Defense, brushed it off as campaign talk.
There is a political election and debate going on in another country. We're going to hear, rhetorical statements that I don't think we need to overreact to, but I think we need to make sure that we are prepared and that we continue to keep our alliances strong.
So European leaders are reacting a little differently today. Some are saying, look, we can't jump every time there's a development in the U.S. election campaign, but we are hearing some concern. Some European leaders are saying, look, every minute that passes is a minute that we could be preparing for the possibility that the United States is not there to support NATO allies in the face of Russian aggression. And we're hearing from some European leaders that this is only going to embolden Russian President Vladimir Putin, who's already waging a war with his invasion of Ukraine.
Frankly, I think this is exactly what Putin loves to hear. Our strength is our unity. And if we're not united, that makes us weaker.
I think the conclusion has to be written already now that Europe needs to be stronger and we need to be able to do more on our own.
Okay, so that's the view from Europe. But, Katie, what's the reaction been among Republicans and amongst some of Trump's supporters here?
Well, Trump had a court appearance today unrelated to the Supreme Court issue. He was down in Florida for an update hearing on the documents trial. There's so many trials sometimes you just have to take a minute to think about which trial it is. No, the classified documents trial. And outside the courthouse, we saw Trump supporters out there in full force, wearing their tank tops, waving their flags, blasting music. They were there to greet Donald Trump's motorcade. So it's business as usual in Trump world, at least for the signs that we see from the outside. We're also seeing members of the Republican establishment either dismiss Donald Trump's claims or get behind them. We know there's a growing Republican resistance to providing support for Ukraine. There's a part of the Trump base that is fascinated by Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump has shown that he likes Vladimir Putin. Just take a look at the comments that we heard today and previous statements admiring strongman dictators. That's what Donald Trump has said very publicly for years now. And then we're seeing, members of the Republican establishment, some of them, including Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, saying, listen, I can't believe we're having this conversation. Trump is not like any other politician. He says stuff. I can't believe we're going through this again. Trump has expressed frustration with NATO partners in the past about not meeting their funding goals. Heck, even Barack Obama, previous presidents have done it as well. Barack Obama coming to Canada in 2016, making a different, more diplomatic and polite push, delivering a speech to Parliament saying the world needs more Canada, NATO needs more Canada. It didn't work then to get Canada to hit its funding goals now, and the way that Bill Blair responded, I don't think Trump's threats now are going to get Canada to hit those targets either.
All right, Katie, thanks so much. That's the CBC's Katie Simpson in Washington. Okay, we're going to dig into that comments and what another Trump victory could mean for this country. Rob, look, we've heard U.S. presidents lecture other countries on not meeting the 2% spending targets many times in the past, including Barack Obama. I've never seen a former and potential U.S. president say, I'm not going to defend the people who don't pay, because America is the backbone of NATO in so many ways.
Here's something I thought I'd never say on television. The United States, it seems, could be run soon by a mentally unhinged would-be mafia don who wants to run a protection racket rather than a military alliance. That's what he sounded like yesterday. Look, the sad truth is this notion will be popular with a lot of the people in MAGA world. There are a lot of them who in 2016 thought that this was utter madness. Already they've started, like Lindsey Graham, complained about this in 2016, supported him today. Yep. Marco Rubio, the same thing, supported him today. The truth is that only once has Article 5 been invoked with NATO. Article 5 is when you're attacked, you must go and support your NATO ally. And that was after 9/11. And I was in the United States during 9/11. And you know what? Canada came to the aid of the United States. A whole bunch of other countries came to the aid of the United States. We went into Afghanistan. We lost 165 people. Other countries lost a whole bunch of people, blood and treasure. Gander, Newfoundland came to the aid of the United States. Yep. And it worked. It worked to protect the United States. I'm a history major, and it baffles me to think that people forget in the United States that twice in the last century they were compelled for their own, I think for their own very good reasons, to go in and help their European neighbors. That seems to be dawning again, and it just beggars the imagination to think that this could happen in the United States after November.
Vandana, we saw the reaction, and Rob, I'm just thinking about if I had said that back when you were my boss, my God, you would have called me into your office so fast, but I take your point. But, Vandana, a lot of people will dismiss what Donald Trump says as just Trump being Trump, and he's wrong on how the 2% thing works. It's not a dues, based system, but the plain meaning of what he says and has said in the past is he doesn't support NATO, he doesn't believe in NATO, and he is clearly leaning towards, Russia, at least, in who he favors in a lot of these things. We saw the Canadian ministers trying to downplay it a little bit, but how should Canada and other countries respond to this?
We've seen this before, and the country has responded before to someone like Donald Trump. I can't repeat what Rob said, but I applaud it. But I will say that, the Prime Minister has dealt with Donald Trump before. There's no need to show alarm because we've managed this. We on our own stand up as a strong country. We're not some dinky country. We're a G7. We have our own economy. In the past, Justin Trudeau has stood up to Donald Trump. He's worked with him, and when they threatened steel tariffs, we threatened right back. We're not going to fold for anybody. So I think they're downplaying it because they've been able to do this before, and I think they're confident they'll be able to do it again. Right,
but Lisa, Rob, I kid him, but he's right on the stakes of this, right? I mean, there's reporting in the New York Times where, in a first-term presidency, Donald Trump was saying, wait a minute, if they invade Lithuania, we're going to go to war over Lithuania, and he called that crazy. I mean, with what's happening in Europe, I mean, how does Canada and how do other countries respond to this potentially happening in the United States?
So this was major red flashing warning lights for me. I'm going to tell you this, and it's not about NATO. If you take a look at the North, if you take a look at the polar North and the countries that ring the Arctic Circle, some of them are NATO, 2 of them are not, or 1 of them is not. And if you have to honestly look at yourself in the mirror as a Canadian and ask yourself, are we doing enough? Are we spending enough in the North for our sovereignty, for our defense, for our search and rescue capabilities? The answer is very clear. It's no. So if you want to take what he's saying about NATO and then apply exactly the same kind of logic to what's happening in the North, then I think we have a recipe for disaster. And I'm extraordinarily worried about whether or not Donald Trump thinks that this is something that applies everywhere and not just to NATO. Meaning, if you're not paying what you should be paying on NORAD, if you're not doing what you should be doing Canada in terms of participating in the defense of the North, then we're going to leave you to it and we're going to look after ourselves.
But Brad, there were people around Trump the first time who were seen as moderates and had tried to curb some of his more baser impulses. And should he win, and we don't know what's going to happen between now and November, there's no moderates around him right now, right? Like there's a lot of true believers. capos, to use Rob's example. I mean, how do you even deal with this, knowing that this is the thought process of the guy that right now is the front runner to win this job in November?
Yeah, well, and to be honest, there's not much individual Canadians can do about this other than feel somewhat helpless and a little concerned. When you take a look at the biggest threat to Canadian security, Donald Trump encouraging Vladimir Putin to do whatever he wants, not just saying, I'll turn a blind eye, but actively encouraging him to do, quote, whatever the hell they want, poses a significant risk. What is after Ukraine? I mean, the notion that Article 5 holds up and NATO allies currently that border Russia, the reason why Article 5 is so necessary is because it dissuades Putin from invading those countries. If Article 5 is no longer of any use, and Trump can pick and choose which countries get protection and which don't, then Putin actually has all the more reason to invade other countries. And obviously we saw what he did with Ukraine. This is why Scandinavian countries are saying, after decades of not wanting to take a side, they're signing up because they don't want to be invaded. So, this election in November, the presidential election, there's a new element here, and then that is, not only is our trade at risk, investment at risk, our supply chains at risk, but now our national security, Trump is now putting at risk. So we have a lot, and if people look at this American presidential election with indifference, I think today they've been invited to look at it with greater concern, because our security is now directly put in the path of Donald Trump.
So Rob, a lot of the countries right on the border with Russia, that Eastern Europe sort of flank of NATO, they're over the 2%, so they actually meet his threshold, I guess, for mutual defense, right? Yeah. But it kind of speaks like it doesn't really matter, I don't think, with him, because I don't think, going back to the example I used as a baker with the Times reporting that Lithuania, that would be crazy. There is a tendency to dismiss what he says because he says a lot of things, or to write about it in our profession for the tactics he's employing rather than the plain meaning of it. I mean, do you think people are, as Brad and Lisa spelled out, live to just like the reality of what this potentially means if this becomes the thought process of the most powerful person in the world?
I think part of his effectiveness is that he says outrageous things so commonly that we do tend to dismiss it. We shouldn't dismiss the NATO threat, though. In 2019, he almost took the United States out of NATO during a summit in the UK, I believe it was, in 2019. He has been historically antithetical to NATO, and he has also been historically quite warm to Putin. He fought his own Congress on disclosure of the nature of his relationship with Putin during his first term. So should we be concerned? We should be very, very concerned. We should also note, though, that not only the Baltic countries, but Germany has also become much more militarized as a result of this. Japan has also become militarized as a result of this. Biden has actually been very, very sure-footed on how he's handled the invasion of Ukraine. NATO is actually more united now than it has ever been.
Yeah, the Congress is the challenger. But I know we joked about the descriptors that you used in the beginning. But is that the way we got to start talking about this guy? You know what I mean?
Just think of it. I'll give you what sounds like a trivial example, but Taylor Swift should be loyal to Donald Trump as well, he said, because somehow he helped her. So this notion of loyalty, which is straight out of a grade B a gangster movie, seems to be a trait with him. And I would say he's transactional. Everything he does is transactional. You've got to be loyal to him in order to get something from him. That's just not the way military alliances work.
Right. So, Vandana, just as a final point, I mean, Canada is focused on the Team Canada approach, mostly on the economic relationship. But when you're one of those countries that is not on his good books when it comes to actually spending what he wants to spend on defense, when it comes to meeting your obligations of NATO, how do you handle something like this, as part of your foreign policy challenges?
Canada always works well. They're a valuable member of NATO and of NORAD. We have great relationships with our allies. I don't think they have to worry about that. I think, this government has been very focused on maintaining world order and international institutions. And I think what we should be worried about is actually this mindset of Donald Trump, being shared with others. I mean, we see this is the result of far-right populist politicians, and we see that playing out in the House now. Games on the Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement. You're seeing people like Leslie Lewis saying that Canada should pull out of the UN. Like, we can't have this, spreading further. So Canada is in good standing on that. They've always worked with their allies well, and I think we have to continue that space.
Okay, we're out of time. We got to leave it there. I want to thank the Power Panel: Rob Russo, Vandana Cotter, Brad Levine, and Lisa Raitt. Thanks so much, gang.